All right, we are reading from the book Dallas Pimiento, Book 4, Bronco Fury. And the name of this piece is Glazed Indifference. Once the puppy was asleep, Otto and Beulah were able to slip into the ship's library and kiss each other by the light of a single flashlight. It would be more romantic by candlelight, Otto whispered, more to show Beulah that he thought romantically than because he really felt that way. Yes, Beulah agreed, but candles are too dangerous on board a ship. Just as she had begun to unbutton her shirt, a noise came from the tiny galley adjacent to the cookbook section. What was that? Otto hissed. He turned the flashlight off and grabbed Beulah's hand. Together they slowly tiptoed to the doorway. Otto turned the flashlight on as he peered around the side. Water was flowing from under the sink onto the floor. The pipe burst, Otto told Beulah after examining the sink. I guess we should tell someone in charge, Beulah suggested. Otto looked at her intently. Yeah, he said. He kissed her firmly, like a man about to board a troop train. Let's go. Out in the corridor, heading vaguely towards the bridge, Beulah stopped. I'd feel better if I had Casper with me, she referred to the puppy. Do you want me to go with you? Otto asked. No, you go ahead. I'll get him and meet you, Beulah insisted. They parted without sentiment. An hour later, with the ship 1/4 filled with water and listing to port, Otto stood on the bridge with Captain Pukewall. Otto stared grimly at the moon, remaining silent the better to help the captain do his job. Reminds you of something I saw on TV once, Pukewall muttered. Another officer, the legs of his trousers soaking wet, entered. He saluted. Well, Narvik? The captain asked as he gripped his binoculars. No sign of the young woman, the man replied. I did find this, though. He held out a leash of light blue nylon. You recognize this? Pukewall asked Otto. Yes, Otto answered. It belonged to the dog. The captain's eyes narrowed. I thought you said you loved this woman. The selected take their place before the sniggering fat man. Infrared photography, as yet unavailable to the children, would not have helped them anyway. The centipede sentries were wearing stealth armor. It repels all attempts at infrared detection, Lorba smacked his fist into his palm, cursing this closed avenue of action. How do you know that, by the way? Durglin asked, with more than a little contempt. Lorbus pretended he hadn't heard the question, but continued to make every appearance of calculating furiously. Can't we call somebody? Joy, Blurfy's little sister, asked. She was clutching her baby doll, Miss Sims, to her. Phones are useless, Durglin explained. Of course, Lorbus shouted, throwing up an index finger. Blurfy slapped his shoulder furiously. They were trying to make as little noise as possible. Of course, Lorbus repeated, this time in a hiss, by triangulating the negative impulses. You don't know what the hell you're talking about, Durglin drawled over Lorbus's words. True, we'd need some kind of tracking device, Lorbus mumbled to himself as he turned away. Durglin, Blurfy began, we really need to leave. I know it, Blurfy, Durglin, who had once dreamed of playing professional squash, nodded. But I really don't know where we'd go. We don't know where the centipedes are, if that makes sense. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We don't know where the centipedes aren't, if that makes sense. I want to go home, Joy wailed. Shut her up, Lorbus growled. He pointed his finger at the little girl. Stop it, Joy, stop it, Blurfy begged. I told you not to bring your little sister, added Lorbus. Durglin climbed up a mound of red dirt and peered through a gap in the boards. He thought about squash. Less pressure than tennis. What can you see? Lorbus asked him. I think the church is on fire, Durglin sighed. Well, that's something. Wayne Shorter arrives, bearing gifts. The only way you could improve this album, Frenchie took his lollipop out of his mouth to speak, was if Ron Carter was on bass. But would it really be improved, Woodrow wondered. They sat reclined in lawn chairs listening to Adam's Apple in the artificial backyard with the cavernous room. Overhead, night was being simulated by the gradual dimming and switching off of the lights in a pattern so that at last only one would be left on the far end of the room. And eventually, that one will be dimmed and switched off as well? Asked Major Moondark, observing the activities of the room's inhabitants with a group of researchers in a secret chamber almost a mile away. Exactly, replied Don Drabble, his shirt pockets stuffed with papers, pens, and markers. But should one of the inhabitants wish to read, what would he do? Moondark queried, adjusting one of the fingers on his mechanical hand. Well, there are electric lamps available, Drabble explained. Moondark flexed his jaw. The ligaments in his temples jumped. I must confess that I fail to see the point of these experiments, he said, straightening his shirt cuff. But as long as money isn't being unnecessarily wasted, I don't see the harm. Would you like to visit the room personally? Asked Drabble. I can arrange it quite easily. Moondark considered a moment. Yes, I would enjoy that. What do I need to do? 10 minutes later, as Frenchie got up from his lawn chair intent on putting on a different album, Woodrow announced, "Ah, here comes my uncle." "Your uncle?" Frenchie asked, stopping the music. "My Uncle Ralph. I said he might be coming over, remember?" Woodrow rose from his lawn chair and shook hands with Major Moondark. "How are you, Ralph?" "I'm great, Woodrow." Moondark smiled by pulling back at the corner of his mouth briefly. "Why'd you turn that off?" He addressed himself to Frenchie. "I like it." "Do you like Iron Maiden?" Frenchie asked, holding up another album. "I don't think I've had the pleasure," Moondark replied uncertainly. "Oh, it will be a pleasure," Frenchie assured him. All alone in the break room, Doug drew a happy face on his sandwich with the mustard. "Happy faces," he told the audience, "especially if I draw them, always look like me as a child to me." He put the top of the onion roll on the sandwich. "I don't know why that is. Maybe I see the innocence of it and think of the simple happiness of my idealized childhood, which of course is nonsense, because I don't think I've ever been unhappier in my life than as a child." Some in the audience wept openly. Some frowned at the non-inclusion of meat on the sandwich. Now, I like to have a little something with my sandwich. Now, of course, we all like fries, but usually settle for chips because of the hassle in either making them from scratch or heating up the frozen kind in the oven. Of course, they're never as good, but I have a new product for you today. Some of the audience made sounds of awe and anticipation at this announcement. "It's Instafries from Miraclou." Doug placed the package on the counter. "The company that makes this product is not a sponsor of this program, nor am I compensated in any way for presenting this product on the program. When I find something I like, I use it, no matter whether I'm paid. There was a polite round of applause at this statement of principle. Doug began to prepare the fries in accordance with the simple instructions on the package, but was interrupted by a knock on the window set in the door behind him, the one that led to the fake backyard. Doug looked and turned back to the audience. "Why, it's Mr. Pimiento," he said with a smile. He opened the door saying, "Come in, come in. Brrr, it's cold out, isn't it? Look, everyone, it's Dallas Pimiento." Enthusiastic applause greeted the visitor. "What brings you here, Mr. Pimiento?" "Well, Doug, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this program has been canceled." Dallas Pimiento was forthright. "What?" Doug demanded. There was a collective gasp from the audience. "As a matter of fact," Pimento continued, "none of today's episode has been broadcast. They're showing an old Ealing comedy right now." As Doug stared dumbfounded at the audience, Pimento picked up his sandwich and took a bite. "I listened to them scream." Many of those who saw the monster likened it to a gargantuan loaf of bread. The consistency of opinion, noted several commentators, was quite staggering. "It is possible," theorized Ted Bleeder of the Hurling Institute, "that the introduction of mass-produced pre-sliced bread into the city only 6 months before contributed to this widespread perception of the monster as a loaf of bread. Thus, marketing's power to distort reality is made manifest," Dr. Dunwooper, who concurred with Bleeder in a widely photocopied newspaper article, wrote. "For all we know, the monster actually looked more like an old fishing hat." "There was no monster," E.J. Burnenlog, who often wrote into the paper on subjects of marginal interest, spoke for the underprivileged group who had been out of town that day. "If there had been, it would have left footprints behind." "Fools! Waiting Numbago," the monstrous creator shouted in his secret base. He crumpled the day's newspaper into a ball and tossed it to a beast chained to the hearth, who promptly ate it. "Do they not know power when they see it?" "They are ignorant, Mr. Numbago," Carrie, Numbago's assistant, expressed herself. "Indeed they are." Numbago's eyes were half closed and his lips were curled. "Loaf bread. My God." "The one man said it looked like a fishing hat," Carrie added. "Fishing hat? Fishing hat? Where do they get these people?" Numbago's fist pounded on the heavy wooden table. "Don't know, Mr. Numbago," said Carrie. "Well, we'll give them another chance to get it right." Numbago rose from his throne. "Come to the vitalizing tank." "But Mr. Numbago," protested Carrie as he hurried after his tall, caped-in, booted employer, "the next monster isn't ready yet. You said yourself that it needed at least 2 more weeks of soaking." "I know, Carrie," Numbago admitted, standing on the lip of the tank, "but I have grown impatient with the tiny minds of the population. That's why—" His speech was cut short when Carrie pushed him into the tank. As green, foaming bubbles engulfed him, Numbago flipped off his assistant. Fraternal onion bagger. Sheldon arranged the ceremonial boxes in the shape of a fish head as prescribed by the ancient code. "Thus do I manifest my devotion," Sheldon intoned for the benefit of the puppet-bearing children who sat on small, circular rugs only a couple of paces away. Bob the Weasel, normally a dancing, wriggling clown, stood quite still, covered in glitter, his big eyes replaced with tiny ones for the occasion. Behind Sheldon and Bob rose the forever inaccessible castle of Foggin. Behind the castle was the velvety sky that, limitless though it seemed, was in fact a curved dome keeping out the rain and falling objects. On the ramparts of the castle stood the tiny king Bagshaft and the high priest Clamosam, the two surrounded by soldiers in orange and blue. Prompted by a black-garbed functionary with a plastic indicative hand glued to the end of a dowel, the children raised their puppets aloft and cried in response, "Give us what we want! Keep the rain off our papers!" Now was the magic moment. Sheldon spun around on one foot one time and threw his arms wide. "Tell us your name!" he shouted. Each of the children's puppets did so in turn. As they did, sometimes addressing a personal detail or expressing his or her delight at being there, the king and the high priest spoke together quietly that no one else might hear. "This batch is the worst yet," Bagshaft whispered. "I told you," Clamosam replied, "the days of the interesting children are over. Still, there might be one here that will really do it, you know?" "Yes, I was just going to say, maybe there will be one. There's always one," Clamosam sighed, looking down. "That one, however, might be playing some goddamn video game even as we speak." Bagshaft clenched his fist. "It's just like cigarettes 100 years ago," Clamosam made the comparison. "Most people had no problem with children smoking." "Speaking of unrealistic comparisons," Bagshaft changed tack, "do you remember that after-school special about the Amish boy who snuck out of the house to watch TV with his friends from school?" The king did not wait for an answer. "I always wondered if he decided to adhere to his family's traditional ways after he came of age." Happenstance is here again. The woman standing at the entrance to the factory asked me my name. "Dallas Pimiento," I told her. She ran her finger down the list attached to the clipboard she held in the crook of her arm. I saw by the insignia sewn onto her sleeve that she was a member of the Weasel Patrol. "I don't seem to see you," she shook her head and said in a gently corrective voice. Do you see the name Lance Ash?" I asked. "I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to." Her voice was firmer, but I cut her off. "Because Dallas Pimiento might be in parentheses after Lance Ash." I took a tone calculated to make it clear that I was not to be brushed aside. She glanced at my eyes, then checked again. "Ah, yes, here you are." She sounded delighted. "Are you two the same person?" "No," I answered after a pause in which I ran my tongue over my bottom teeth. "Come right in, sir," she said, stepping aside. "Please select one of the badges to wear during your visit." Her hand passed over a small table on which 24 badges bearing the portraits of various people were arranged. I selected Albert Camus. "Very good, sir." The woman checked something on the clipboard. I thanked her and moved into the factory, pinning on the badge to the lapel of my coat without looking. My eyes were on the throng of people standing before the giant banana sculpture that was the centerpiece of the large room. "Dallas," a gray-haired man hailed me. "Good to see you, man. Drink?" He shook my hand while he gestured towards the wheeled bar slowly making its rounds around the room. "No, thank you. I didn't want to start that up again." I noticed that the gray-haired man's badge bore a picture of Joseph Conrad. "You do remember me, don't you?" he asked. "I bought the first painting you did in the fake cartoon series." "Oh, of course," I laughed. "It was Locust Turnbolt. I didn't recognize you." Suddenly, appearing on my right was my wife. "Your badge is upside down," she informed me. Pinhook gets its balls. The whale, spotted 2 more times before the sun set, seemed to be retracing the route taken by the grab mutter the day before. By the light of the citronella candles, the journalists gathered to ask Chancellor Wilty what would be done. "Well, I don't know about yo," Wilty betrayed his rural upbringing once again, "but I'm going home and have some supper." He smiled at his own joke. "I thought you hicks always said dinner," came a rough voice from the back of the crowd. The polite laughter ceased as eyes turned in the direction of the speaker. "Who's that?" Mary Wilty, the Chancellor's wife, whispered to Norm Gofford, one of the assistant press secretaries. "It looks like—" "No, it couldn't be." The topping slid off Gofford's slice of pizza onto the pier. The stranger moved through the reporters, the tassels on his leather shirt fluttering as they caught on camera straps and spiral-bound notebooks. "Ladies and gentlemen," as Welty said nervously, "I'm sure some of you must remember Zober Chowlaskin, our former Minister of Natural Resources." "I may be only a former Minister of Natural Resources," Chowlaskin began, but his clever retort was interrupted by the pier being torn apart by the sudden ascent of the whale from beneath. Amid the screaming of people, the rending of lumber, and the triumphant laughter of the great ocean-going mammal, one could, if one were in a silent one-man hoverdome nearby, as I was, catch the faint sound of anchorman Chuck Froberry, safe back in the newsroom, demanding to know what was going on through one of the slowly sinking headsets that had been knocked from the head of the already dead reporter or cameraman. But why, I asked myself, and continued to ask myself for some days afterward, did the headset sink slowly, and not drop immediately to the bottom? The answer came, as it so often does of late, from a consultation with the learned Mary Wilty, whom I had saved from the mass of drowning people. "Because it was made from a new polymer," she explained to me as my wife brought a scale model of the whale into the room. "I worked on it all night," my wife said. "Show us exactly where the nuclear device penetrated," I asked our guest. The ineffectual and the lame. Flakes of snow preserved in the pessimist's oven until such time as the radio was free of pablum tested the patience of those who believed in the adages passed down to them by their forefathers. These snowflakes, you see, are each exactly alike. "No two snowflakes are exactly alike," insisted Mrs. Gumblings as she peered into the oven door. "It is an object lesson in how no two people are exactly alike." "Well, how about 50 people?" asked Cousin Slim, "because you've got about 50 snowflakes in there, each exactly identical." "Can't be," Dick Melanogaster agreed with the old lady. "Must be some kind of trick." He examined the knobs and fittings of the pessimist's oven as if seeking to learn its secret. "If we could just take them out and see them up close, then we could know for sure," Mrs. Gumbling suggested, her bony hand reaching for the door handle. "I just heard Sweet Emotion on the radio upstairs," Troy Weather announced, coming down the stairs into the kitchen, "so I'm afraid we can't open that door." Mrs. Gumblings had snatched her hand away at the first sound of Weather's voice. Now she massaged it with her other hand as if it had just been shocked. "I just can't believe it, that's all," she mumbled. "I won't believe it." "No faith," Weather mocked. "Troy," Cousin Slim brought up a good point, "Sweet Emotion isn't pablum, it's classic rock." "Yes, I agree with you, much as I hate the term classic rock," Weather said. "However, by the terms of the warranty, pablum includes any overplayed song fallen back on out of habit. Think of All Right Now by Free." "This thing is under warranty?" Melanogaster rubbed his chin as he mused. "I won't have you sabotaging this project," Weather stepped between Melanogaster and the oven. "My God, you're just like this guy I knew back in high school." "So much for no two people being just alike," Cousin Slim observed dryly. "But they aren't," Mrs. Grumbling snapped in her nasal Yankee voice. "How do you know?" demanded Weather. "You never met the other one. I tell you they're exactly alike, right down to that silly tattoo on the neck." The more nearly fictitious of the two. Stuffed into the tiny box like quality ingredients into a sausage were the cowboy and elephant patterned socks that the Duke needed to complete his outfit. "Well, who put them there?" the Duke asked with mock exasperation. "I do not know, sir, Samaud," the Duke's manservant replied with no trace of concern as to the manner by which the socks had gotten themselves so bizarrely lost as he held out the open box. "Well, thank goodness they're found, at any rate." The Duke reached into the box and withdrew the needed articles. He sat down on a chair and began pulling them over his feet. "Where did you find the box?" he asked, "and what made you think of looking into it?" "It was where I found the box that caused me to look into it, sir," Samaud replied after a pause, its location being so odd. The manservant was looking into the box with an expression of puzzlement. "And where was it?" asked the Duke as he stood up, feet fully socked. "Sir," said Samaud, "there was a piece of paper, a note in the bottom of the box." "Really?" The Duke reached into the box again and pulled out the paper. "Oh!" he said as he unfolded it and began to read. "It's addressed to me." He read in silence. "Where did you find that box?" he asked again after finishing the note, this time in a voice devoid of his usual light-hearted tone. "In Miss Markfellow's cosmetics bag," the manservant revealed. "In—" The Duke's mouth was agape. "Well, we'll go into that later. Right now we need to hunt for Panzerfred." "Your terrier, sir?" "The very same. In this note she claims to have kidnapped him. The socks were just a distraction." "I suspected something like this, sir," Samaud was somber. "Why so?" "Because Miss Markfellow has disappeared. She left all of her luggage. It was her disappearance that caused me to search it, Samad explained. I see. The Duke tapped his chin with a note. He debated with himself whether to continue with his plans to attend the local library's used book sale in disguise. Alright, we're going to stop there. See you next time.